Chapter 2, Lesson 5 of Advanced Algebra, we're looking at absolute value functions and their graphs. We looked at the characteristics of an absolute value function in the last video, and a couple characteristics just for review. We know that the absolute value function graph is going to look like a V. It's going to have a V shape to it. And we also looked at the vertex, that one point where the graph changes from going down to going up. And we looked at how to calculate that vertex. We want to look now at how we can graph these absolute value functions looking at their equations. And we're going to look at three ways. We can graph them making a table, and then we can graph them using a graphing calculator, and then we can graph them writing two linear equations, which is really an application of solving absolute value equations, which we did earlier this year. So let's take a look at making a table. Now, to make a table, we can begin, or we want to begin, by determining where the vertex is. So we're going to use that opposite of b over m and then c in order to calculate where the vertex will be. Again, that vertex being the important point that we want to know where it is. And then we can choose other x values and substitute them in order to get some corresponding y values. Now, we know that the shape is a V, so once we find the vertex, and this is why we want to find the vertex, is because then we can choose an x value on the right side of the vertex to get a point, to draw that side of the absolute value function, and then we want to choose an x value on the left side of the vertex to find the other side of the absolute value function. So it's important that we find the vertex first, so that when we choose our other 2 points, we know what values to choose for x. And then that's all we're going to need are those three values. Now, when we graph these, we want to label our graphs. And the only point we really need to label, and the only one that we're interested in, is the vertex. So we'll graph the vertex, and that will be it. Or we'll label the vertex. The other 2 points that we use, because everybody will choose different x values, you don't need to label those, but you will just need to mark those on your graph. And then finally, you'll need to put the equation of the graph on there. So let's graph this equation, y equals the absolute value of 3x plus 12. And again, we want to find the vertex first. So we're going to take the opposite of the b, and that's 12, over m, which is the letter or the number next to the x, 3. So our absolute value x coordinate is a -4. So -4 we know is where the x value is. Now, how do we find the y value? That's the c value, that's out here, plus 0, so the y value is at 0. So when we go to graph, again, make sure your graphs have scales on them. So we'll put the scale on here like this. Make sure your axes are labeled. And then we want to go over -4 and up 0. So our coordinate is right there, that's our vertex. Now, we know that it's a V shape, so we know it's going to go up on one side and up on the other. So we want to choose an x value to the right of the vertex and an x value to the left of the vertex. So I'm going to go ahead and choose this -3 for my next x value. And to get its corresponding y value, I substitute it into the equation for x and then solve it for y. So I'm going to substitute in -3, so it's the absolute value of -3 plus 12, and then simplify it. So that's going to be -9 plus 12, which is going to be the absolute value of 3, which is 3. So when I choose -3, a positive 3 is the y value. So I'm going to graph that. So go over -3, up 3, and again, I don't need to label that. And then I just want to choose one point to the left, so I'm going to choose -5. Okay, I'm going to need some more space, so I'm going to erase this. And I substitute in my -5 now. Whoops, that's 3 times -5 plus 12. And I'm going to simplify that. -15 plus 12. So that's -3. The absolute value of -3 is 3. So when I plug in -5, I'm going to get positive 3 as well. So then we're going to graph that. So now I have the vertex and I have a point on each side, so then I just want to, I need to go ahead and use my straight edge and draw the sides of the function in here. So this is going to look like this, and this is going to look like this. So again, I have my V shape, and then again, finally, I want to put the equation on here. I don't really have enough room up here, so I'm going to write it down here. Y equals the absolute value of 3x plus 12. So that's how you would graph an absolute value function using a table. Find the vertex first, find the value on the x or to the right of the vertex and to the left of the vertex, and then make sure you label the vertex along with the graph. Alright, so that's all there is to making a table. So now we want to look at graphing these with our graphing calculator. And with our graphing calculator, there's some steps we need to follow. And the first thing is we need to make sure that the equation is in the form y equals. In other words, if the equation is not simplified or solved for y, then we want to algebraically move everything and manipulate it so that it is solved for y, because that's the form it needs to be when we enter it into our calculator. So once we have that, we'll select the y equal key on the calculator, which is in the top left. We'll enter the equation that we have then, whatever we have over here on the right of the equation. And then for the absolute value sign, in order to enter that into your calculator, you'll need to select the math key, scroll across the left to the number menu, and then select number 1 for absolute value, where you will either get a parentheses if you have the older operating system, or you'll actually get the absolute value sign if you have the newer operating system. You'll enter in the equation, and then you'll select the graph key. So let me show you kind of what that looks like. I have one on my computer here. So you won't see this graph when you select the y equal key. You'll see something like this, where it'll actually say y sub 1 equal, and you'll have a list of 5 or 6 different lines where you could put equations. So then we go ahead and enter in the absolute value. So our equation was absolute value of 3x plus 12. So you're going to enter in the absolute value key, and you'll get parentheses. I'll get this because mine's a little bit different. And then we're going to put in 3x plus 12. And then you just select the graph key, and then you'll get a graph that looks like this. Now you won't have this on yours, but I have mine. So right here we have the vertex. So this is where we would put the vertex, and we'd want to label that vertex. Okay, so we would label that vertex. Let's see if I can label. No, let's not, because I don't know how to do it, and I don't want to spend time doing it. And then we have our equation here. So this is what your graph would look like on a graphing calculator. So graphing on a calculator is pretty easy. Again, you just want to make sure that it's solved for y, and then you just enter it in. And that's all there is for graphing on a graphing calculator.